Hi everyone, welcome to Thursdays on the Stoop. Today we have Writing About Disability with Davi Schweizer. Davi is the author of the poetry collection Echo Decay with Kith Books 2024 and Only Seconds Until Detonation, forthcoming from Querencia Press. They are the founder of Troublemaker Firestarter, a queer and feminist literary magazine and press. Additionally, they work and occasionally teach at Rowan University. Super excited for today's session. Take it away, Davi.
Hey, hi everyone. Thank you for that intro, Rachel. So we're just gonna get started. Thank you all for posting who you are in the chat. Very interesting. But oh, there I have to click. Okay. So our goals are to examine common ableist tropes in literature, to amplify voices of disabled and neurodivergent writers, and to encourage and foster anti-ableist representations of disability. Uh, so what is neurodivergence? Neurodivergence is not a diagnosis, but more of a care philosophy. It's a more inclusive way to describe people whose brains function differently. This perspective emphasizes the positive aspects of aiming to highlight the strengths associated with the diagnosis, rather than focusing on remediating the deficits. And now, what is ableism? So, ableism is discrimination against disabled people. Uh, this was coined by Zosha Zaks. Uh, Ableism is a belief that a life with disability is inferior to a non-disabled life. The discriminatory attitudes and actions that stem from that belief. So, more than a quarter of us in the United States have some type of disability. And this really blurry screenshot, people's normal disabilities are with cognition, mobility, independent living, hearing, vision, or they struggle with self-care. Um, their way. So, if this was a 15-week course, this would be our textbook. This is Crip Theory by Robert McRower, and Crip Theory attends to the contemporary cultures of disability and queerness that are coming out. Both disability studies and queer theory are essentially concerned with how bodies, pleasures, and identities are represented as normal or as object. But Crip Theory is the first book to analyze thoroughly the ways these interdisciplinary fields inform each other. Okay, I feel like I'm blowing through this presentation. Uh, but I'm going to read something from Jenny Zhang's fiction. Oh, thank you, Rachel. If you'd like to buy the book. But this is from Jenny Zhang's essay, How It Feels. So, darkness is acceptable and even attractive, so long as there's a threshold that is not crossed. But most people I know who suffer relentlessly and unendingly, no matter what sort of future is proposed. It'll get better. It won't always be like this. You will start to heal. I know it's such a cliche, but you really will come out of this stronger in the end. Why is it so humiliating to go on and on about something that means a lot to you, only to be told, wow, you spent a lot of time thinking about stuff, don't you? Or, so you're one of those people who analyzes everything, huh? Or that's kind of dark. Or worse. Um, okay. So personally, I feel like this is a pretty good representation or like an explanation of how it feels to have like an ableist experience. Curious to see how it feels for other people. Uh, ooh. So let me take a breath really fast. But I'm gonna give you guys some time to think, maybe 3 minutes to write, just to write some stuff. So consider a disability that you or someone close to you has. How is it represented in the culture? How would you write about it? Or consider in your current project how disability has played a role. Do you feel like you're representing disability in a nuanced and thoughtful way? How have you written about it? And I also want you to think about, does your protagonist make important decisions? And is the story happening to them, or are they in control of their lives? Uh, I will say we'll have until 4:12. You can type your response in the chat. You can just write it down. But yeah, thank you, Amy, that it resonates. If you need me to go back to the also slide, I can like click back and forth. Okay. I really should have just put this all in one slide. But felt crowded. So, would anyone like to share? I'm like dying to talk to you guys.
I can share, but you mean like our process? Like, are we still writing, or you mean like,
Um, how did this prompt work for you?
well, I think that I didn't really get started that much, but the idea that I was thinking about was that for with like mental illness, I wrote it's portrayed in culture as psychos or famous people who've overcome such difficulty and they're so brave. There doesn't seem to be like often just the daily survival of what it takes. Like you get like venerated for if you're like highly like beyond scope successful, or I feel like then or everything horrible that happens is always like that's what someone with mental illness is like. Yeah, so that's how I
Mhm.
thought about it.
No, that's great. We're gonna get right into that after that. We're gonna get into that.
Okay, okay.
Perfect.
But
Perfect.
you
Yeah.
said you were dying to talk, so I was like,
Yeah.
I'll
No,
talk.
thank you so much for volunteering, Erica. I
Okay.
appreciate you. Does
Yeah.
anyone else want to share before we move on?
If you don't mind, I haven't really written anything yet because I haven't had a chance to explore the prompt, but I'm reading just this prompt in general. I think it's also a way to think about writing. I'm autistic, so I write about my disability a lot in my poetry. It's a struggle to write it in fiction, though. It's a struggle to write it
Mm.
in nonfiction a lot more. Um, but so I guess like for me, the way I've written about it is kind of um, I've tried to write a horror with neurodivergent characters, and it's just that fine line of I guess what I've thought of when I've tried to write it was I got to balance out not exploiting my own disability and my own community of people in that disability while also still having some badass characters in a horror film, and also not inserting, I feel, my own disability community as, I guess, a victimization standpoint, because
Mm.
marginalized folks deal with that in so many different ways in general, but especially disabled folks too. So, yeah. Someone asked me on the chat, can I answer
Mhm.
it if that's okay? I
Of
don't want
course,
to
yeah,
take up
I would
space.
also like to know.
So what about your autism translates well into your poetry? I think it's because with poetry, well, first off, I write both poetry obviously for going to the page, but also I'm a slam poet. Like well, not just a slam poet, but I compete in poetry slam. So having that free range, I think not that I don't think about narrative, but narrative and following the arc of the narrative isn't as vital when I'm writing a poem because you can experiment, you can kind of break down form a little bit easier. When I'm writing my story, it's easier to I think to forge a stanza than it is to forge a set of paragraphs that aren't going to come out as maybe the same thing every time. Um, I don't know. Maybe that's the best way to explain it.
Thank you. I would like to move on to Blake, who wanted to share.
Hi. First, I was really excited about this class. I'll start by saying that like I'm able-bodied, so I was like really interested in this, especially because in my novel, like there's quite a few characters who have different disabilities. It's a kind of like tender queer love story that takes place in the 1870s. So a few of the characters are Civil War veterans, and I was really interested in like portraying this kind of tender story. Sorry, my dog is like right next to me. I don't know if you can hear him snoring. In like kind of like a hyper masculine setting. So, um, like the main character is somebody who had like a traumatic head injury like during the war, and I think that he does have like a lot of agency and like makes decisions for himself like throughout the story. I think my concern is that it is like sort of a little bit of like a mystery, and like I'm worried that I'm like using this injury as like a thing to like add like mystery to his character, especially because he's sort of like the romantic interest of like the protagonist. So I want to make sure I'm like not doing that. And then there are like other characters who have like more like physical injuries because, you know, there were like a lot of soldiers like lost limbs and things like that. So,
Hmm.
yeah.
Yeah, I hear you on trying to not, because so often with like brain injuries, you fall into that like amnesia stereotype or just something kind of, yeah, I hear you.
Yeah, and I think it's like it's quite often where like other characters like view him as like slow. And then it
Mhm.
I don't think he actually is that way, and I think that's kind of like part of his relationship with this other person is like this is like one person who like doesn't treat him like differently and actually just like gives him like room to talk, and then it turns out like he's not actually like
Mhm.
kind of the way other people discriminate against him. So but I'm excited to hear more about what you have to say about all
Of
of them.
course. We're gonna do Kate, Caitlin, and then Belinda, and then we'll move on.
Hi, I wanted to piggyback off of
Oh.
Linnea Whitten's statement about how she wanted to explore how how to use a wheelchair in theater because I am writing about a disability but not about my disability. I
Hmm.
was inspired by the Dawn Avatar Robot Cafe in Japan where housebound employees remotely pilot robots. And I was thinking to myself, if you can pilot a robot for work, why not pilot a robot for the stage? So I'm
Mm.
really excited about figuring out how that works. And also, like, the idea of using an entire robot as a prosthesis, too.
Interesting. Yeah. And then we have Kate. Sorry, I think we got a little confused with the Caitlin and
All
Kate.
good.
It's okay.
Yeah, well, I wanted to share anyways. It's really interesting, but also, so my main disability is a brain injury from 7 years ago. So in terms of, yeah, the two main questions, like how it's usually portrayed, like, yeah, amnesia or like hallucinating, which is like 1%, maybe like less than 1% of the cases. It's like certainly not my experience. And just like things and like, often portrayed in terms of war and veterans, which is a real thing. I just like saw Dunkirk and it was portrayed there, and that's real. But like, I don't know, just things that aren't relatable to my experience and to like the many people I know in the brain injury community. And Blake, I'm happy to do an offline quick consult if you want sometime. But also in terms of like writing about with nuance. So it was 7 years ago. I like wrote and published a lot about it actually, my first like 3, 4 years. Um, and then, well, then I like got a bit better and it's still like a thing, but I was like returning to work and I didn't have like the emotional bandwidth for it anymore. And also it required like even more nuance because it's like, well, I'm better, but I'm not. But like, I was just like, I don't have the bandwidth to like put this nuance into the writing and put myself out there and my like story out there. Like I felt like overexposed. And I'm glad it felt like a service. I was glad I put myself out there so much and put the story out there and like advocacy and whatnot. But then I just like kind of exhausted myself. So I'm just sort of like dipping my toes back into sharing that part of my health and
Yeah,
existence again. Yeah.
it's a really interesting point about healing and like how do you have someone heal within a narrative without it making being like, oh, to be like healthy again or like,
Right.
yeah.
Without the like inspiration porn. Also, like,
Mhm.
I've gotten a lot better, but I'm not totally still disabled. But like, what audience can understand this? And
Yeah.
yeah, I got kind of exhausted with like trying to explain myself.
Yeah, a lot of my disabilities, like narcolepsy, don't get better. Usually I have it forever. Of course. But yeah. Yeah, Blake would like to know where you've been published. He would love to read some of your work.
Sure. Well, I did a thing for health, and I think they pulled the magazine, but they still have the video on YouTube. I can like put in the chat, and then I did some like other random things. So like I did like because I was doing a lot of comedy writing. I did an interview with people of like when is it okay to joke about disability?
Um,
It's, yeah,
always, honestly, but
big question.
yeah, Belinda, your hand is raised.
Oh yeah. I want to say one thank you for these prompts because they're really helpful around thinking about um what is missing in our culture and what exists. I responded to the first question um around how it's represented and then how I would write about it. And I thought about the sensory sensitivities that I have and how sensory sensitivities are not represented or how they're represented in culture in the sense of like it's usually told from the experience of the person who seems either inconvenienced or impacted by someone having sensory sensitivities and I feel like when it's told from that perspective, then it makes it seem as if like when you have sensory sensitivities that um the words like the phrases like, oh, you're too sensitive, or the things that you're experiencing, something's wrong with you and you shouldn't be having those experiences. Like that's how it's framed in our culture. And I was trying to think about like how I would write about it, and I was like, well, I would try to, do the reverse, like write about it from the perspective of the person that's having the sensory sensitivities, like what is the experience of the person who is finding wherever they're at, like if whatever is happening either in their environment or in their interaction with other people um that it doesn't feel either feels like a lie or doesn't feel comfortable in their body and like why. And then when I was thinking about that but I didn't write about it, I started thinking about like in writing memoir, like realizing how like me going back and writing about my experiences in childhood, like I was realizing that like in the body that I'm in, that no one was actually um holding space or acknowledging like that I was sensitive to what I was experiencing in the home and with my family, and how going outside and then also having that same experience like showed me like, oh, the culture of like, oh, you're not supposed to feel, you're not supposed to, respond in this way to your environment. You're supposed to numb yourself out, and that's like really hard for someone who has sensory sensitivities. um and so yeah, that's what came up for me
Yeah, that's
in that writing
great.
prompt.
I
So yeah.
mean, it's not great, but you know what I mean? But no, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Okay. Uh, so now we're gonna go over some ableist tropes in fiction. Some of you already mentioned it. I think it's the first one. Oh, no, okay, it's not inspo porn, but we will. So the bitter and evil crip. This is usually in children's media, but usually there's a disabled villain where a villain on screen is visibly disabled and they have a difference, and writers use their conditions to make them scarier and more intimidating. It sometimes is their disability is used often as a tragic backstory, and usually the disabled villain seeks revenge. There's an interesting question from Linnea in the chat. Is writing about a disability you don't have bad? Like my main character is a wheelchair user, which I am, but she's also reaching paraplegic or yeah, right? Which I'm not. Um, I don't think it's bad to necessarily do that. It's just important to make sure you understand how you're representing it, kind of. Like I don't think that's a bad thing to do. Oh, Voldemort is disfigured. He doesn't have a nose. Um, he's like facially disfigured. Um, so our next trope is definitely the opposite, where it's the supercrip. A supercrip is someone who is portrayed in media as having overcome their disability, despite the fact nothing about their body has changed. Okay, so Uh, the two manifestations of supercrip, the person either has superhuman traits or the person is special just for doing regular things. Uh, in Daredevil, he is blind, for example, and he's like a superhero who's. I haven't read Daredevil since I was a teenager. Oh God. I think he's like super strong. Sorry, comic book people. But this is S. Leanne Cohen's poem, Definition of Inspo Porn. Inspo porn, noun, a portmanteau of inspiration and pornography, a narrative about disabled individuals by and for non-disabled people for the purpose of emotional masturbation. Template 1. A non-disabled person is a hero simply for interacting with and providing a service to a disabled person with or without asking their permission, or with or without their asking or permission. And then template 2. A disabled person is a hero simply for surviving and succeeding despite all efforts by the non-disabled to prevent us from doing so. I don't really say anything else about inspo porn, but if you've seen inspo porn, it's usually on the news when it's a story about someone with a disability achieving something, winning something, and it's like, wow, they did it despite their disability. And it's like, well, but next up, we have pity crip. The most common stereotype of persons with disabilities is the victim, a character who's presented as a helpless object or of pity or sympathy. There's Tiny Tim, John Merrick, and the Elephant Man. They are disabled characters whose disability is used by the author to earn sympathy from the audience. This stereotype might also be used for comedy, using characters' disabilities, such as Forrest Gump's intellectual disability, to place them in humorous situations. This is from Beth Holler. Super crip and pity-oriented stories are problematic. Anytime people are presented as a disability and not a person or as less than other people or as inspirational for getting up each morning, it is a misrepresentation. Um, uh, I also have a different slide that It's hidden, but it's about love as healing, and that's usually written in romance tropes. But we also have oh, sorry, trigger warning. Sorry, I didn't do that at the top. Uh, but trigger warning about suicidality. But usually characters are written, the disabled character wishes to die and then does in fact die. Uh, we often see this trope even in nonfiction when a writer states that they would rather die than have XYZ condition, or when they speculate that another disabled person should just die instead of suffering with disability. Um, okay, so 1 in 5 characters with disabilities in popular family films fit the super crip stereotype. The idea that a person with a disability needs to overcome their disability. Nearly 1 in 10 characters with disabilities are portrayed using the bitter crip stereotype. I think I changed that to like evil crip. The idea that a character becomes a villain due to being overcome by their suffering. Um, uh, Characters with disabilities are more likely to be rescued and die. And they are also, oh, I guess that's it. So, can you think of examples that fit the tropes we've reviewed? Evil crip, super crip, pity crip, there's inspiration porn, better off dead, or love is healing. And then what other tropes of disability representation have you encountered if I haven't hit them all here?
Can I actually ask a question if
Of
that's
course.
I just am more comfortable asking on here than typing if that's all right.
Sure.
Um, so I totally get when the whole thing with villains being portrayed with a disability like that. They do the same thing, I think, with queer representation with villains, and I think that's always has been kind of, and also obviously racist representation of villains and all that. Um, my whole thing is though, I think a villain, I feel it would it be okay if someone who has the actual disability wrote a villain with that disability, since every marginalized community isn't a monolith and anyone is capable of being both good and bad? There are still corrupt people in every different community that exists, right? So,
Hmm.
as long as I think the disability isn't like a highlighted feature, would that still be part of the evil crypt trope? Would that be still something of ableist nature? Or would it be
Well,
something that is just recognizing that good and bad can exist in any human and no one is infallible? Or is the term fallible? I'm sorry. I always get confused between these both. But I don't know if that's a
um,
good question to ask here, but I thought
no,
I'd
that's a perfect question to
add
ask.
to that.
I definitely think that having important morally gray characters and having characters um, make mistakes or be slimy people is, of course, also okay. But I definitely think uh, when kind of setting up maybe something more for children or just in general, I guess, like, for your
Yeah, though that would
example,
be a good example. If you have like a something that's geared towards children that kind of introduces a villain, I get how that can be impressionable, but I guess I don't know. Um, I just feel like also we don't want to just act like everyone is squeaky clean and perfect in any community, and
mhm.
that no community is a monolith, right? So that's my whole like mindset when I think of that representation too. I'm sorry to interrupt, Dave. Is it Davi? Sorry,
It's
Davey.
Davy, but
Davey,
no,
sorry,
thank you.
Davey.
I appreciate the question. There's an adaptation of The Cricket on the Hearth where Bertha goes blind and then recovers her vision after her true love returns to her. Is that a recent adaptation, Caitlin?
I think it was back in the 60s. It was an animated movie. I found it on like one of those compilation DVDs with Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer and Frosty the Snowman.
Yeah, that is very ableist. Oh boy, jeez.
Where do like somatoform disorders fit where you get like a disability because of a specific trauma?
Interesting. Um, hmm. I definitely think that's usually more nuanced representation. Uh, I have a book list at the end where I'll talk about Post Traumatic by Chantal. She's Chantal V. Johnson. We'll find out at the end of the slides. Um, but where I definitely think having, okay, does the situation, does the traumatic event happen in the novel, or are they already um, traumatized?
Well, in this adaptation, I think it happens in the novel.
Interesting. Um, do you think it falls into any of the tropes?
If I think in this specific instance, it does fall into this trope because, like, she went blind after hearing that her fiance died, but then she recovered her vision after she found out that he was really there in the end.
Hmm,
So I feel like it does fit that, but that also reminded me of, Never Have I Ever, where the main character is in a chair for a while, but then she sees her boyfriend across, and somehow that, like, she's in a chair, after her dad died, she sees, like, her hot classmate across the parking lot, and somehow that's enough to motivate her to, like, unconsciously stand up and walk towards him. And it seems like they do cover that a little bit in the show, the question of, like, what's like, that was that a somatoform disorder, the accusations of people faking it for the people accusing her of faking it for the attention. I never finished it, but the way it was portrayed felt different.
interesting. Yeah. Um, Grace. Okay. In Graceling, Prince Poe recovers from blindness via magical cure trope, where his mental grace allows him to see. Author Kristen Kishore later acknowledged this as a flawed ableist trope. Consequently, in Bitter Blue, she portrayed disability more realistically, showing Poe living with his blindness without it being magically erased. Interesting. Um, yeah, they're all really important. I'm really thinking about the stories of people faking disabilities. That's uh, something that's not really in this presentation, and maybe it should be. Even in Little Mermaid, she loses her voice, her legs, related to love and freedom-ish. Physical disability was framed as trade-offs or punishments. Hmm, fascinating. Uh, so here's just some ableism in popular language use. We have blind and deaf as metaphors for ignorance. We have paralyzed as a metaphor for immobilization or indecision. You have wheelchair bound instead of wheelchair using. Uh, idiot, moron, special, terms to mean intellectually disabled. Crutch to mean something bad you shouldn't use. Miracle equating to survival to something outside the person. And then there was cowardice during COVID. Um, so this is Barbara Hershey's special vans. The city's renting special vans, the daily paper reads. The cops are getting ready for special people with special needs. The mayor's special crip advisor has given special training in moving all our special chairs when arresting and detaining. They've set up special jail cells in a building on the pier. They brought in special bathrooms and nurses, never fear. The cops are weary of our bodies. They treat us in a special way. Special smiles if you're lucky, special brutality when you're in the way. And there's more to that poem. Here are some tips for complex representations of disability. Uh, don't write from the belief that a disabled life is less valuable. Write with the knowledge that disability is normal and not exceptional. Consider the full range of your characters' lives, including but not limited to disability. in fiction and nonfiction. Uh, Strike multiple notes. You have sorrow with joy and anger with humor. Uh, Acknowledge and write the ways that a disabled character experiences ableism, the ways that the world is not designed for them. Um, uh, if you're disabled, feel empowered to write about your disability. And if you're not disabled, be mindful, do your research. Study the tropes that persist in the subjects you wish to write about. Actively complicate them. Read disabled writers and listen to people with disabilities. And if you need to, you can always hire a sensitivity reader. Seek out disabled readers who can consider your manuscript through an anti-ableist lens. Uh, I did. It is Chantel V. Johnson. Good. Here's a complex representations of disability. It's just a book list of books I really like. If anyone has any other books they would like to share. Oops. Okay. I just want to see the chat. Does anyone else have really good books about disability that they would like to share? Could be fiction, poetry, nonfiction. So we have How to Communicate by John Lee Clark. There's Disfigured on Fairy Tales, Disability and Making Space by Amanda Leduc. And then Ellen Samuel's writing. I first read her work in Disability Visibility and Disability Intimacy. If you would like more information or want to read some good poems, I really would suggest this poetry mixtape by Ashley Elizabeth Best. A lot of great poems at this link. Can do that. Awesome. Sure. And now we'll just open it up just for questions. Uh, just curious of how people, yeah, what do people think?
To the other disabled writers, how would you say your experiences affect how you write, like quote unquote, abled or neurotypical people?
Interesting.
Could I answer mine if that's okay? I'm sorry.
Sure.
Um, Also, Blake asked if you go back to the slide about tips. I think for me, um, I usually write as a response. So, as I'm sure some people are aware, people are saying also the R word, as common as some of the very words you just saw listed. And it's not just your right wing manosphere, bro. It's like literally everyone. I'm seeing on different sides of the aisle. Doesn't matter where they lean politically, personally, they're saying the R word. So I'm actually working on a poem um, about a song that also's original titling has that word in it, and trying to respond to it. And a lot of my poems are a lot of call and response. Um, that's just kind of sometimes there's I don't want to say like it's I'm sorry, I'm like freezing a little bit. I'm sorry. But yeah,
Okay.
a lot of my stuff's call and response. So I'm responding to conversations I've seen. I'm responding to the one dude who won't stop saying the R word on Twitter or in my local Family Dollar. or the one guy I had to correct in my handball group being like, "Hey, dude, you know what you said is ableist as hell, right?" And well, it's
People usually don't like to hear that.
right. Well, I'm not gonna be silent for them.
Yeah,
Um,
exactly.
but yeah, so I guess like for me, a lot of it's call and response. I am trying to work towards trying to bring that same theme to my fiction, but a lot of my fiction I write doesn't revolve around disability because it's just such a different format for me. It's such a different
Hmm.
it's such a different way to respond in fiction, and I like to have my fiction have some truth to it. Um, Obviously, when I write and represent my own disability and all that. Sorry, I didn't mean
Yeah, I'm just
long-winded
trying to think
answer.
for Caitlin's question. It was trying to write non-disabled characters with disabled characters.
I
Uh,
think call and response would still apply. You want to build dialogue, why don't you look at the dialogue you have in your own lives, the dialogue and conversations. I don't know. I There's a lot of conversations that I also never got to have a say in, that I
hmm.
never got to, despite how talkative I am now. Um, so I guess like to answer that, I would say like think of if you're comfortable doing that, I just try to dip into um my own memory banks of all the times I've had those really bad conversations. It turned into arguments, it turned into fights about, what it means to be around people that constantly say the R word, and, you know, how that dialogue would look like. And I feel like that stuff can be traumatizing as shit to write part of my language, but if you're able to go through that, I would say do it, but don't obviously put yourself through the dire straits. But think of everyday things you even see on social media. If that's something that helps, I don't know. Um, I think of also like Tony Braxton and Sia and other celebrities who've written a bunch of shit and about autistic people, and I'm just like, well, why don't I write a response poem? Why don't I write a story about a diva-esque celebrity who decided to say, oh, well, maybe those autistic actors aren't talented enough. Maybe, wow, I'm already getting a story idea. Okay, cool. I love this workshop. All right. Sorry about the long-winded
Oh
answer.
no, no, you're fine. Uh, yeah, I'm just thinking the novel I'm revising right now. The main character is clinically depressed. It's pretty much about that. Uh, I wouldn't necessarily say that like the minor characters they interact with um aren't. I don't know, it's a tough call to say that like when you read a book, do you usually headcanon characters as disabled or non-disabled? Uh, and I also think for Tracy's example of any examples of disabilities you like in sci-fi, um, my response is probably, do we all think Spock's autistic in Star Trek? Apparently, the Lunar Chronicles is a wonderful fiction series.
I want to say it, but also I can't, because there's a part of me that's like, well, Spock also talks about not feeling things, and then he starts to feel things certain times and becomes a contradiction.
Hmm.
So I even though he does contradict that whole non-feeling thing, it does kind of create the trope that autistic people get, where we're very logical over emotional, when there's a ton of us that are very emotional too. Like I have big Labrador Retriever energy. I'm a very emotional person. That's why it's a spectrum rather than a one, you know, thing. So I don't know. Maybe at a certain point in the spectrum he has that, but I don't think everyone is like, not that you're saying this at all, like not trying to say that, but I feel like looking at Spock in that manner is like thinking, oh well, logic over emotion, that's an autistic trait. It's not for everyone, and there's a lot of us who do have emotional depth and intelligence, and yeah, I don't know.
Sure, Erica. Erica raised your hand.
Yeah. Um, I agree with most of them. The one thing that came into my mind is then like, what is disability supposed to look like? Because this part, I write about my disabilities and my experiences. And maybe this isn't in the zeitgeist anymore. I'm old, but this is how I feel in my heart that my disability is a superpower and that I mean that I do feel that people with disabilities are exceptional. I don't know what normal is. Maybe the normal people are the abnormal ones and we're not. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I feel like it's
Yeah.
just way, yeah, not to be like,
Oh, no, no,
just,
no. There's something super empowering about feeling like, oh, this isn't a deficit. This makes me feel powerful, or this is just I work differently. And I actually had a colleague, she was someone who was like something about a superpower, and I talked to her about it. She said there's so much like negativity about disability that like it's almost an overcorrection to be like it's your superpower to like feel good necessarily. Is that a way? Does that resonate?
well, I'm not saying I feel good.
Oh,
100%. No, like a lot of my life is battling not feeling good. And to
Hmm.
me, that's a superpower because, and not to, and I get incapacitated. I have times in my life that I've been very, very ill, and not to say that, because then it is a spiral, because then I could say back to myself, well, what are you saying? Be careful, because then you're portraying maybe someone who does, someone may say like, well, you need to rally. And if you rally, then you're a worthwhile disabled person. So I see it's like that's why it's so good to have this dialogue because I don't want to reinforce even myself, like I want to be aware because I don't want to reinforce a trope. I think a lot about my memoir is about my manic episode, and I was in an indie rock band in like upcoming New York scene in the early aughts. There were drugs, there's alcohol, there's, sex, there's band stuff, and then there's the bipolar and glamorizing, because that's another trope, right? Kind of, and Girl Interrupted can fall into that, even though it's one of my favorites.
Yeah, I do. Yeah, I feel that way. I agree.
Yeah. So this is amazing. I love this. Thank you. It's really just making my brain, but I do feel like in some ways the normal versus exceptional can be helpful because it just is a little switch on we can write the story of our life and are we going to write why not be a hero in our own story? Whatever
Mhm.
that means. If it means you check the fucking mail, oops, if you
It's
check,
okay. I don't know
okay.
what Blue Stoop's policy is, but
So
you can
I'm
curse in my
cursing.
classroom.
Yeah, yeah. Like checking the mail. Like there are times where I'm like, doo doo doo, I finally checked the mail. So that's yeah. My coffee just kicked in. I'm gonna go on mute now, but thank you. This has
I
been
know. Thank
wonderful.
you so much, Erica. Thank you. Yeah. Th- Interesting. Lady Dynamite Maria Bamford's short-lived comedy show about her experiences.
Oh, I met Maria Bamford. I live in LA and
Oh my
she
God.
is the loveliest and the funniest. And I was at an open mic telling a story about being unhoused because of the bipolar and then getting back up on my feet and just kind of the experience. She came up to me after and she talked to me for like 20 minutes. But she made sure what was so nice about her, is she commented on everyone's story. And because we bonded on the mental health stuff, she took a little extra time with me, but she's fantastic. And like when I was at my lowest point, I listened to her comedy about mental illness and it made me feel like so less alone,
Mm.
So, because it can be so isolating. All disabilities can feel so isolating. But anyway, yeah, Maria Bamford.
Oh, and I have some additional resources. Uh, there's the Disability Visibility Project, Dr. Beth Holler. There is Leonard J. Davis, Constructing Normalcy. There's Disability Studies Quarterly, Word Gathering, a journal of disability poetry and prose. And then there's Wishbone Words. Those last three things they're all lit mags. Yeah, any like final questions? I think we have 5 minutes left. Um, well, if anyone has any follow-up questions later, you can always contact me at my website. It'll go to my email, and we can definitely talk later again. If you want to follow what I do, I'm Troublemaker Firestarter on most social medias. Um, we're about to post volume 11. Who will be in it? Our book will come out this summer, volume 11. Um, thank you all for being here.
Yeah, thank you so much, Davy. Thank you all for coming and participating. It's a really great session. I shared a few links in the chat. As you know, this is a free session, but if you'd like to support Blue Stoop, you can make a donation. You can also fill out a quick feedback survey, which helps us apply for grants. If you'd like to attend more events like this one, check out the events page or subscribe to our weekly newsletter. We'll be here again next Thursday, and we'd love to see you there.
Yeah, thank you all for being here. I really appreciate it. What a lovely conversation.